All right, welcome back to the hills. If you tuned in to the last video that I posted here on YouTube, Kentucky rut hunt, I ended it with kind of a clickbait, if you will, of I was going to explain to you guys in a podcast form of how the hunt ended. So here I am. And I'm not proud. Let me preface this whole thing by saying, like, the entire experience was great. The entire weekend was, it was hunting, right? Like, there was highs, there was lows, we were battling some pretty unconducive for deer hunting weather. We were dealing with 60 and 70 degree days, wind. The forecast was calling for gusts to be in the 30s, and I figured we could make it work, but the gusts seemed to be back to back to back, and it was almost more of a sustained 30-mile-an-hour wind than it was gusting. And then to top all that off, we were right at the peak of rut, so everything was locked down. Everything that I'd been seeing the last few trips up there they were tied down with does. And that's not a complaint. That's just the reality of hunting the rut, right? You're going to get to that point where the bucks are just locked down, and there's a way to hunt it. A very successful way to hunt it, and that's that 10 to 2 time frame. I don't think I've ever spoke about it here before, but I know I've told a lot of people, when you're in the peak rut, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., that's the time to be, in there. Preferably all day if you can, but if you have to block out a time, that 10 to 2 time frame just seems to be where the successful window for those, bigger mature bucks to come off those does and get back to cruising. So if you watch the video, Friday evening, it started off, I went up there, got up there later than I intended to, so I did kind of just like a little impromptu hunt on a piece that I knew there was a big buck walking around in there. Did some light scouting, found a few rubs, found a highway of deer trails. I mean, there were deer trails coming from every direction, but they all ended up funneling into this one little gully coming up onto the road, the cut through road. It's a pretty well maintained gravel road you can drive on, but they were crossing right there. So I hunted that Friday evening, and it was unproductive, which didn't hurt my feelings any. It was more or less, I kind of wanted to go hunt that particular spot. That way I didn't put pressure on the spot that I really intended to hunt later in the weekend. To get back that night, we start discussing about, where deer have been, and I start putting all the puzzle pieces together, and I decide to go check a spot way back on a ridge where another buck had been seen down below crossing, and I figured, he had to be going somewhere, whether it was up on the hill that I was hunting on or across the valley on the other hill. He had to be going somewhere during the day, because he had been seen 2 times at night down in the bottom of this valley, crossing through a pasture. So I went up there. I left early that morning, got up on top of the ridge, ended up taking a wrong turn or something on the 4-wheeler trail, and ended up going down a separate set of finger ridges than I had intended to, which at the time seemed a little bit, of a nuisance, because I had planned on being set up in this stand that was up there before the sun came up, just to catch any sort of morning movement, and then, sitting there for pretty much all day. But anyways, when I ended up going out that other finger ridge, that wrong side of the property, I ended up seeing a boatload of sign. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen that many scrapes in a row. The entire ridge, every 15 to 20 yards was a scrape and a scrape and a scrape, and there was a few rubs in there. And it was very apparent that a buck was using that series of finger ridges in transition. So I was kind of glad, and I'm really glad now looking back that I ended up going down that ridge, because it kind of instilled a little bit of confidence that I was in the ball game of where I needed to be as far as the bucks were concerned. And then the last time I went up there to hunt back during bow season, it was pre-rut at that time. The deer were moving. They were definitely starting to, get their hierarchy in check, and it was a great experience, but I knew that I wasn't really where the big buck was at that time. So I kind of just put another puzzle piece together, ended up moving back there, and got on some really good sign. Now, fast forward through the rest of that day, those winds that I was discussing earlier, they came in probably about 9 o'clock. I saw one buck earlier that morning. You can go back and watch the video if you'd like to. But there was a bobcat, come to find out, that was kind of boogering the bottom side to my right and pushed a smaller buck up behind me. Probably a 2-year-old 6 or 7 point. Like I said, he's in that video if you want to go back and look at him. But in that moment, I knew, like, I was in the area because I had that doe. I believe there was a doe blowing at me down below. The little buck that got pushed up by the bobcat that I believe the doe was blowing at. The sign back behind my shoulder, few hundred yards, but still back behind my shoulder on the other ridge that I had been on that morning. I knew I was in the ball game. I just wasn't feeling confident with how much of that wind was blowing. So I hopped down later that night, or later that afternoon, ended up going to stand way down low to try to get out of the wind. Still wasn't out of the wind, so packed up and actually went and sat on the field where the big buck had been coming through. And I could definitely see why he was going through there, but in the same manner, if you go back and watch the video, I had 2 fawns come down off the hill. I don't think he was ever going to come through there in the daytime. And I still don't believe he'll come through there in the daytime. I think he's definitely coming off the top of the hill, one side or the other, at night. So we go to Sunday. Sunday, I knew I had to pack up and go home. So I figured I was going to get up early now that I knew how to get to that stand again. I was going to get up early, get up there in the dark, and sit it until 2 o'clock, right? Because like I said, that 10 to 2 time frame is the money during the peak rut. I didn't just want to sit around being lazy all morning, so I figured I'll go sit this thing from sun up until 2 p.m. Now, let me preface all this by saying Kentucky, I believe as a whole, if not Eastern Kentucky for sure, I'm 99.9% sure the entire state of Kentucky was in rifle season at that time. So I had my rifle with me. That's all I took up there with me this go around was my rifle. And I'm a pretty crack shot with a rifle. There's a lot of things that I can do with a rifle, and I have a lot of confidence in my capabilities, but more so my limitations in a rifle. So keep this in mind as I continue on with this story. So get it set up, no movement whatsoever early that morning. And I had assumed that there wouldn't be. I had assumed that, any buck worth taking was locked down with a doe at the time. And I wasn't extremely worried about the lack of activity that was going on early morning. What I was getting worried about is the wind started picking back up. And it kind of started messing with my psyche a little bit, which was mistake number one. I was starting to lose confidence in the spot, which, looking back on it now, probably was another factor that led into the horrible decision I made towards the end. So day goes on, pushing 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I'm doing some call sequences. I'm rattling, I'm bleeding, I'm grunting, the whole 9 yards. Basically doing everything I can in my power to create movement, right? If the movement wasn't going to come naturally, I was going to try to get it to come to me under my own willpower. And nothing, absolutely nothing. So lunchtime rolls around. I've basically decided, absolutely 2 o'clock's my cutoff. I'm done at 2 o'clock. We're going to call it a day. 1 o'clock comes around, and the wind, even though it was 60 degrees, the wind actually started chilling me off. I mean, I got cold a couple times. So my confidence levels are going even further downhill at this point in time, which is not an excuse for what I end up doing, but it's a domino effect, right? These scenarios and these situations, it's never just one defining moment that creates a mistake. It's typically a domino effect, right? One thing after another. The day before, getting in there late, seeing the sign, all of a sudden not seeing any movement, getting cold, the wind, on and on and on. 1:30 rolls around, and I've been basically talking to myself at this point in time, like, hey, you gotta keep your head on a swivel here. It can happen at any moment. And I don't think it did what I wanted it to do. It wasn't actually piquing my confidence levels. I was basically slipping into this not depression, but this stage of like, it's not going to happen. I might as well just pack it up and go. And then 1:30 comes through, and I'm sitting there contemplating, like, maybe I should get down now, call it a day, lick my wounds at home, let bygones be bygones, come back up in a week and hunt the post rut. Well, just as I'm thinking that to myself, I just so happen to peek over my left shoulder, and I see probably 150-inch class 10 point coming through the brush down below me at about 120 yards. And as I'm watching him, and now mind you, what I'm about to explain to you happened in a course of probably 10 to 15 seconds. I mean, it was pretty quick, the entire exchange. From the time I saw him until the time I didn't see him again was probably about 10 to 15 seconds. So I see him come out of some thick brush down below me, 120 yards, I would safely say. He comes from basically behind my left shoulder down the hill and is perfectly coming left or right to my left side. I see him and I realize what he's doing. I can see that he's getting ready to dip down into this valley that I'm hunting over the top of, and I'm not going to see him again. I knew it. In my heart of hearts, I knew it. I said, this is the only glimpse of him that I'm going to get. So as he's coming through, I grab my rifle, I look at my cameras, and I said to myself, I don't need to film this. This is not something I want to show the public. Like, this is not a I'm proud moment. And as I was thinking that, I stand up in the stand, I put the rifle on him, and at that point in time, he's actually headed nose downhill, so his butt is towards me, and all I can barely see is the outside of his right shoulder. I mean, I could barely tell where the lump of the muscle was sitting on top of the scapula. That's how quartered away he was. And in that moment, I said, this is the last time I'm going to see him if I don't shoot him now. So I put the crosshairs and I tried to choke it as far back down his rib cage as I could, and I was basically going to run the round straight up his ribs and out his chest. In my mind, that's what I needed to do. But as I got my crosshairs on him, and I can still, it's only been a few days, but I can still like vividly remember telling myself like, hey, you don't have this shot. Which that did one of two things. A, it told me like, don't pull the trigger. And B, I was basically talking myself out of it. Like this is not going to work. Right. So even if it was a little bit, more broadside of a shot, just the simple fact that I said that should have been game over right there. I should have put the rifle back on the holder and watched him walk away. Right. He won. But instead, I take the rifle off safe, squeeze the trigger, gun goes off. I look, recoil happens, rifle settles. I get back on the scope. I look, and he's just walking down the hill. Not spooked in the sense of like, hey, I've just been hit, I'm hurt. Just a simple 1 foot after the other, I'm continuing on with the plan of the day. So I reload my rifle. I knew right then and there that I had missed him. Tried to follow up and get another shot, and sure enough, he slips down into the valley that I knew he was going into, and I didn't see him again. So I continue to make mistakes and free climb. It was a ladder stand, but I free climbed down the stand with my rifle in my hand, which is completely unsafe. And I beg of any of you who might be listening to this, do not ever do that. I mean, the amount of mistakes I made in this short window were unbelievable. Climb down with my rifle and start down this bank, which is super steep and really slick because of all the leaves that have fallen this fall. Fall on my butt probably like 5 or 6 times, well deserved. Get down there, and of course, I don't see him, I don't see blood, I don't see anything. The reason I said in that video that I towed a moral line, and the reason that I am partially grateful for the series of events that happened during this hunt. First and foremost, I'm glad I completely missed him. I mean, plain and simple, I didn't even graze his fur, right? Like I probably yanked it to the right, and if I had to guess, I'd say I missed that dude by a foot. I mean, there was absolutely no damage done to him whatsoever. But it also kind of checked me. So I started this filming thing, I guess 4 years ago now, when I actually started, trying to self-film my own hunts. And, I've done the TikTok live, I've done these podcasts, I've posted on social media, and my thing that I always, try to portray is the hunt is not about the harvest. It's not about the antlers. It's not about anything other than reconnecting with the primal side of our human, predatory side of life, getting in touch with what our Creator gave us, resetting your mind, right? There's so many other aspects to hunting than the harvest. The harvest is literally just the cherry on the top. Holding antlers, whether it's antlers or whether it's just a little spike or a doe or a squirrel or a rabbit or a turkey or whatever it is that you're chasing, holding that animal with, a camera in front of your face at the end, taking a photo to show your buddies, that's just the cherry on the top. That's not what the experience is. And because of my own stupidity and my own greed, I'm going to say that it's greed. That is the best word that I could explain, that I could use to explain what happened. Is this feeling of, I have to do this to prove to myself that I'm still capable of doing this. When this, the quote unquote, this has nothing to do with going home with a deer in the bed of the truck. Has nothing to do with it. And I completely missed the mark. Not only with my bullet, but with my train of thought and where my heart was and where my soul was. And it truly, in the moment, I was frustrated. Okay, let me just keep adding to my own grave here, so you guys can bash me in the comments. In the moment, I was frustrated. I was like, I can't believe I just missed that deer. Da 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 da, and I was aggravated and throwing my hat and acting like a 4-year-old and just throwing a temper tantrum. And the reality of it is during that 5-hour drive home from Kentucky back to North Carolina, it was, hey, dude, you told yourself not to take the shot. You knew so much so that you didn't even offer to turn a camera on, right? Like, you didn't even think to yourself, hey, let's get this guy on film. No, the greed in your selfish heart, again, this is me talking to myself, said, hey, stand up, squeeze the trigger. And during that 5-hour drive home, there was a mixture of emotions of being ashamed of myself and at the same time rejoicing in the fact that I didn't hurt the animal and everything in between. But as I was crossing back into the North Carolina state line, it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, man, you got too far away from the true course of what we're doing. You stepped outside of parameters that, granted, no one ever wrote a book and said, this is how you're supposed to do it. And that's the beautiful thing about hunting, is we can all do it our own separate ways, but there's the unwritten rule of, like, don't make it about a trophy, right? Don't make it about a picture. Don't make it about, I have to come home with something or I failed. Because if it gets to that point, you're doing it for all the wrong reasons. I think parts of me, and this is not me passing the buck, I'm not blaming anything or anyone other than myself, because at the end of the day, I made the conscious decision to do what I did. But I think subconsciously, I let everything get in my way, from, the great companies that stand beside me and have partnered up with me, to the cameras that are in front of my face all the time, to the social media. I let all that compound, and I let myself make a really, really boneheaded decision because of it. And I don't think sorry is enough to justify and rectify exactly what I did. I don't think the words "I'm sorry" can really, just sweep that one under the rug, per se. I think, and I know that I've really, really got to just remember what it is that I am doing out there in the outdoors. Fast forward, and I may or may not post this video. I'm not 100% sure. But yesterday, so today is Wednesday. Yesterday afternoon, after I got done working, I slipped off into a piece of public, hiked way back in there, was following some decent sign, and a couple does came through. I hadn't even set up. I was still, just scouting through, and a couple does came through, and I harvested one of them. And in that moment, it was kind of like a welcome back, dude, right? Like this is what it's about. It's not about the antlers. It's not even about the doe that I harvested. It's about the fact that I got reconnected with who I am as a human being and as a hunter. I'm the guy that loves to go out there and enjoy the beauty. I love to hear the birds. I love to watch the squirrels running around, no matter how annoying they get when you're in a tree stand. I love to see animals in their natural habitat doing what they naturally do. And then if God, deems it the appropriate time, I love harvesting animals for the sustenance that they provide my family, for the memories that, that live forever in my mind and feed my soul and remind me that even on the worst days, there's always greater ahead. And as I was way back in there on that piece of public, and as I loaded her up on my back, I packed her out. As I loaded her up on my back, and I felt that weight just sit down on my shoulders. It was kind of like the weight of what had happened on Sunday was lifted a little bit. I still, from that day on, this day on, I will forever have that in the back of my head of, hey, like, don't even get anywhere near that line again, because I don't like to say it this way because I love social media for what it is, but I also hate it for what it is. But I don't want to ever come across as a social media hunter. I don't ever want to come across as someone who just does it for the clout, right? I do it because I love it. I love the life. I love everything that's involved in it. I love the conservation. I love, providing money to sustain the habitat. I love going out and working the habitat myself. I love predation control. I love every single aspect of what whitetail deer hunting is. And in that brief moment, greed. That's all I can say. In that brief moment, I just let greed get the best of me. And I'm sorry. And I'm telling you guys this. I'm not looking for a woe is me. I'm not looking for a pity party. I'm not looking for a, hey, it happens to the best of us, because it doesn't. That should not happen. There's no excuses for it. And at the same time, if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum where you want to come and just absolutely ridicule me in the comments, I mean, it's a free internet. Do whatever you want, but don't think you're going to tell me anything I haven't already told myself. But the whole reason I'm bringing this to you and I'm trying to be so open and so honest and so vulnerable is because I don't want you as an individual hunter or someone who might be going into hunting to make the same mistakes. Obviously, like, if we could learn from everybody else's mistakes and not have to make our own, life would be just amazing, right? Like, if we didn't have to go through life and make our own mistakes, it would be a lot smoother of a process. But the reality is we do. But even if you don't learn from my mistakes, I hope it opens your eyes to, if it does happen to you, you're able to check yourself like I checked myself. Because if that started to become a trend and I never noticed it, then I would be just like everybody else that I tried to defend the common hunter from, right? You should have gave him another year, guys, or that's small, why'd you take him, or any of the bashing that you see on the internet from what you sit in, whether it's a tree stand, a saddle, a ground blind, to what you hunt with, whether it's a compound, longbow, a crossbow, right? Like, at the end of the day, the reality is none of that is important. As long as it's legal and ethical, nothing we do as far as the harvest is important. That's not the point of what we are doing. And if you think that it is the point, if you think that the harvest is the point, I would argue to say that you're missing the big picture. You're missing the beauty of what this is. You're missing everything. I mean, you truly are, shorting yourself of everything that hunting can be and should be. And don't get me wrong. There's a flip side to this coin. I believe in that moment when, that trophy buck presents himself. Yeah, do what you got to do to get the job done, right? Like, as long as you're safe and legal doing it, if you got to lean out and twist your body and contort yourself like a gymnast and all these things, I've done it and I'll do it again. And I mean, that's not at all what I'm saying. Do what you have to do to get that good shot off. But if you ever get to a point like I did where you are in a dilemma, not even a dilemma, where you are given an option of, watching the deer walk away, or the turkey or the whatever walk away, or forcing a shot that you have no business forcing. Because at the end of the day, that's what I did. I tried forcing a shot that I knew in my mind I could not make. And if you are ever put in that position, I beg of you to make the decision where you just let the animal walk away. Because maybe you're not as lucky. That's a weird word to say considering everything that happened. Maybe you're not as lucky as I was, and you end up, hitting that animal. Let's say I hit that animal in the leg. Like if I shot him in the elbow, right, of his front leg. That's not going to be a fatal injury. However, now that deer is without a leg, could potentially set up infection. Who knows? The coyotes, the whatever, can get after them. All because of the greed of, I want antlers to wrap my hands around. I don't think there will ever be an animal that is just so magnificent, right, that it deserves us not giving our absolute best and most ethical shot on him or her, if it's a female of the species. Not even I know that, like, that completely it would be, completely against what you're saying right there. You're saying this animal is just so magnificent that you have to, potentially hurt it. Now, little mistakes happen, right? Hit a limb, punch the trigger, whatever, right? Those little, you can't really control it, mistakes happen. But I had 100% control of everything I was doing in those 10 to 15 seconds, and I still chose to do the wrong thing. And granted, like I said, that animal's not hurt. I didn't even touch him, but that was completely unethical. And if you've watched any of my videos, those are the 3 things I preach on, as long as it's legal, safe, and ethical. I missed the mark. And I apologize to that deer. I apologize to you guys, myself, everybody that might be involved. And I apologize to my good Lord and Creator for taking that risk. And at this point in time, that's all I can say. I've got a lot of great memories. I've got a lot of haunting memories of deer that I didn't get a shot at, or, You know, like I was saying, those mistakes that are out of my control. But this is going to haunt me in a different way because of me towing that line of my own hunting morality, morals, whatever the correct word is. So, again, say whatever you want to say in the comments. If you have any questions on anything, if I didn't really explain anything too good, feel free to ask down below in the comments. Yeah, that's all I got on it. I mean, kind of got a long way to go now. I have some things to prove to myself that I'm not chasing, you know, whatever it is that I might be chasing, and that I'm still doing this for the right reasons. Because as painful as it is to say what I'm about to say, if my heart is not in it for the right reasons, I'm gonna have to be mature enough to hang it up for a while. And I don't know if I can live without hunting. So I gotta really check myself and dig deep in my soul. But anyways, that's the reality. That's the truth. I hope you took something away from it. If you did, obviously, you know, leave likes, comments, shares, follows, all those good fun things. Or don't. I don't really deserve it at this point in time. I mean, nobody ever deserves it, but I definitely, you know, don't deserve it at this point in time. But if you deem it, you know, fit, it'd be great. But until next time, see you on the hill.